Ghislaine Maxwell, convicted of running a child sex trafficking ring for deceased financier Jeffrey Epstein, is appealing that sex trafficking conviction. Her lawyer, Aidala, says she's ready to take the case all the way to the Supreme Court. We spoke at length with NewsNation's senior story editor, Paula Frolick. Paula, good morning.
Good morning. Well, Hena, Arthur and I talked about a range of topics, including Ghislaine's appeal and whether or not she's getting special treatment in prison. So I began the conversation basically just by asking how she's doing in this Tallahassee prison.
For someone who's been incarcerated as long as she has, under the brutal conditions where she was kept during her trial, she's actually doing very well, like much better than I expected. I wish she was closer. I would go visit her just to spend time with her. She is so knowledgeable about life. She's a world traveler. And, look, just so everyone is clear, when they arrested Jeffrey Epstein and they charged Jeffrey Epstein, the name Ghislaine Maxwell was nowhere found in any of the paperwork, in the indictment, in the grand jury minutes. She was a non-entity. It wasn't until he's dead, and now they've spent all of this time, effort, and energy on Jeffrey Epstein and this big sex trafficking ring, that all of a sudden Ghislaine Maxwell's name pops up.
Well, we know that Ghislaine feels like she's a proxy for Epstein. But when do we expect to hear a ruling on this appeal? And if she gets the appeal, is she going to testify?
Okay, so there's questions, yes. The timing, we don't know the timing because there's no deadline for this appellate court to rule. I will be honest with you, I'm not overly optimistic, but this is the type of case that can go to the United States Supreme Court. The big issue has to do with a non-prosecution agreement, and to your question about will she testify, we're asking that the case be thrown out because there was a non-prosecution agreement signed by Jeffrey Epstein, which said, if I plead guilty and I go to jail, you're not going to hurt anyone around me. So we're asking that the case gets thrown out the same way they did in Bill Cosby's case, where he signed a non-prosecution agreement and the prosecutor ripped it up and tried him anyway. And the appeals court said, no, that's a binding contract and Mr. Cosby's got to be set free. That's what we're trying for Ms. Maxwell. So she would not have to testify because her case would be dismissed.
Well, let's talk about her life right now, because she was recently kept in the area of the prison dubbed the Snake Pit, where she was reportedly threatened by other inmates and suffered some anti-Semitic abuse. What was her life like in the Snake Pit?
I could tell you that she is a very popular inmate, and I know that sounds, I don't know, weird or odd, but she's very well liked. And one of the reasons why she's very well liked is Ghislaine speaks, I think, 5 languages, but she speaks Spanish very well. And there are a lot of Spanish women who are incarcerated, and a lot of them who need help with their cases or what's their legal stuff or immigration stuff.
Is that one of the reasons why she was moved into the area called the Honor Dorm? I mean, how did that happen? They were saying that some women with stellar behavioral records have been waiting over a decade to get in there, and Ghislaine kind of hops right in.
Well, I don't exactly know what, the thinking was by the Bureau of Prisons, but she's been a model citizen. I mean, she really has been. She follows all the rules. She's very helpful. She does everything she's supposed to do, doesn't cause any problems. As I said, she has become very popular, I think, not only with the inmates, but with the guards themselves. But, and a lot of people also feel that this was a case all about men abusing women, all about men trafficking women, all about men sexually abusing women. And there's not one man who's been charged now that Jeffrey Epstein is gone. There's not one man who's been charged, convicted, pled, or in jail. There's only one woman. And again, a woman who, when this whole investigation began and the first arrest was made, her name was nowhere. She was never mentioned.
Well, speaking of Jeffrey Epstein, you told Chris Cuomo last month that Ghislaine had thoughts on the mysterious circumstances around his death, but you wouldn't say what those were until after the hearing. And here we are, suicide or murder. What does she think?
Well, I don't be mad at me, but I'm going to wait until there's actually a decision from the court, and I want to ask Elaine and make sure. Obviously, I'm telling you things she told me. I asked her permission. I told her I was going to go on with Chris Cuomo on Chris's show, and she kind of scripted me what I could say and what I couldn't say. So I need to kind of go back to her and just make sure that she's cool with me revealing everything that she has told me I'm allowed to say publicly.
Okay, well, I'd appreciate it if you would, and if you would come back sooner rather than later and before the appeal, because we know that will be years, and it's basically going to be in her book anyway, won't it? She's writing a tell-all memoir, correct?
I know. I mean, I keep getting asked this question. I really didn't discuss that with her. We talked so much about her case. 90% of what we spoke about was about her case and her briefs and her filings and the transcripts and motions. And 10% was about her running track and her being friends with the inmates and all of that stuff. So I didn't dig into, Ghislaine, are you writing a book?
Well, I mean, considering she's saying that the book will exonerate her, it would be nice to know kind of what's in it. Is she going to talk about any of the men? Is she going to talk about the people who visited the Caribbean island in New York or in New Mexico?
Well, the only name she brought up on her own without me asking was Alan Dershowitz. And she's like, all of that stuff about Dershowitz. And then she, cursed. She's like, it's all BS, basically. She's like, none of that's true. She goes, none of that's true. Dershowitz never fooled around with any of these. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Well, it's interesting
that was the only person she used by name.
It's interesting that she would bring up Alan Dershowitz, but she wouldn't bring up like Prince Andrew or the Clintons. Has she actually communicated with Prince Andrew or the Clintons at all since being convicted? Or her ex-husband, Scott Borgerson?
I know she didn't talk to Andrew or the Clintons or anything like that. She may, I can't say this definitively, but she may have been in contact with her former husband because I think they still have a good relationship, my understanding is. So, look, before all this happened, she was a very popular, well-liked person in many aspects of society. And she just shakes her head and says, how did this happen? How did this get so out of control?
That actually brings up another question, because she did have all these friends. Have any of them communicated with her? Are any of them saying, we'll give you a character reference? And if so, who?
I don't know who has spoken to Ghislaine and who hasn't spoken to Ghislaine, but I know in my experience doing what I do, that you really find out who your friends are when you're confronted with these dire circumstances.
Does she actually believe she's done anything wrong?
No. In other words, she thinks that these charges, I mean, in her whole life, I'm sure she believes she's done things wrong in her life. But regarding these charges, no. I mean, you started off this segment saying about her being a proxy for Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, that's exactly how all of the evidence was twisted and contorted into making her, Jeffrey Epstein, and she vehemently denies that that's the truth.
So she's saying she's not guilty of anything.
Correct. And we went over the whole we were not the trial attorneys. We went over the whole transcript, and the judge who tried the case was so obviously convinced that her role as the judge was to make sure Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted. She did not get a fair trial. The prosecutor was allowed to put in any evidence they wanted, and the defense was so limited in the evidence that they were allowed to put in.
But at the same time, what does she say about all these women who were underage saying, hey, she wanted me to hang out and give massages? Does she think that's okay?
I think there was only one woman who was underage, and I'm not even positive about that. And there were 4 women who testified at trial, and there's I mean, I don't know, 20 years in jail for a massage.
Okay.
That's look, I don't know what's going on in Chicago, but in New York, you have homicides going on here, murders going on here, and you're getting a much lighter sentence than 20 years. So again, I could just keep coming back to that. She was treated like she was Jeffrey Epstein. She never got a massage. She never sexually assaulted anybody.
But she never at one point said, hey, Jeffrey, this is a little weird. Like, you're asking me to pick up more girls? Why don't you just get a professional masseuse?
I'm sure if Ghislaine was here, she would have an answer for you. But there's also, no obligation for her to call 911 and call the police or anything like that either. She's basically saying that asking a woman to get a massage, to give someone a massage, is not a crime, and it's not. And by the way, these victims, as they're called, they were flying on private jets. They were literally eating caviar for lunch. There's at least one, if not more than one, who said the period of time I spent with Jeffrey Epstein was the greatest time of my life. It was the great. These are women who are in their 40s now, who are saying when they were in their early 20s, period of time when I was with Jeffrey Epstein was the greatest time in my life.
Well, not everyone is saying that. Let's be clear. And also, let's rewind.
One of the four witnesses.
Let's rewind a little bit. And are you saying that caviar and private jets make up for everything that what these women are saying happened?
Well, it's just interesting that they didn't say a word for, I don't know, 15 years, 20 years. They didn't complain. They didn't say a word. Then all of a sudden, once the laws changed and they were in a position to get money, I've seen this over and over. We all have seen this over and over again.
That's true.
But there's always a financial element. There's always a financial element.
Listen, there were times, there were several women who talked to Vanity Fair. The article was killed. People who talked to other areas, the article was killed again. So they're being told, hey, no one's going to believe you. No one's going to put your word out there. So they're just like, all right. I mean, what about that scenario?
That was all about Jeffrey Epstein. Nobody talked about Ghislaine Maxwell. No one complained about Ghislaine Maxwell. No one called the FBI about Ghislaine Maxwell. No one called 911 on Ghislaine Maxwell. Nobody. Not one person ever. Ever. It wasn't until the feds didn't have the guy who they spent millions of hours going after, millions of dollars, thousands of hours going until he was dead. Then all of a sudden they're like, well, what are we going to do now? But during that whole period of investigation, going all the way back to 2007, 2008, when he pled and he signed the non-prosecution agreement, Ghislaine Maxwell's name is not even listed as a co-conspirator. Her name is nowhere. She's nothing until Jeffrey Epstein's gone. And now they don't look at the men. They don't prosecute the names you rattled off before. They prosecute her. And that's
it's also because she hasn't said anything and she knows everything. But I have one final question for you,
That's
Arthur.
America. God bless America. It's the Fifth Amendment. You have the right to remain silent.
I have one more question for you, Arthur. You are a notoriously famous lawyer, very good at what you do. You're also expensive. How is she paying for her bills?
And she has family. She has her She has her ex-husband. That wasn't a problem.
So is her ex-husband paying your bills?
I'm not going to get into those details because out of respect for them and their privacy. But we with this case, unlike others, we didn't do pro bono.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Arthur Aidala. You're wonderful.
Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.